Churchill was born prematurely on November 30th, 1874, to Jenny and Lord Randolph Churchill in Blenheim Palace. His father, a member of Parliament, was not around a lot, so young Winston Churchill was sent to the Harrow boarding school in northwest London, where he was vaunted for his great memorization, but looked down upon for his poor grades. In 1893, he attended Royal Military College at Sandhurst, where he graduated 8th in his class in 1894. In 1895, he joined the British military until 1899, where he fought in the Medista War. After leaving the military in 1899, he joined the Morning Post, a British newspaper. While reporting on the Boer War, he was captured in South Africa and later escaped to Swaziland, a small South African country. There, he was able to make contact with the British government, who brought him back to Great Britain.
Winston Churchill joined Parliament as a member of the Conservative Party in 1890. After disagreeing with the ideas of the Conservative Party, he joined the Liberal Party in 1904. 4 years after joining the Liberals, Churchill became president of the Board of Trade at the age of 34. Then, in 1911, he became the First Lord of Admiralty until 1915. Then, in 1919, Churchill became Minister of War and Air under Prime Minister David Lloyd George until 1922. Later, during World War II, he became the First Lord once again on September 3, 1939. This led to him becoming Prime Minister in the thick of World War II on May 10, 1940.
At the beginning of World War II, Adolf Hitler began his rise to power, but he was not seen as a threat to the countries of Europe. On the day Churchill was appointed Prime Minister, May 10, 1940, Hitler and the Nazi forces invaded the countries of Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Then 2 days later, they would invade the country of France. This left Britain alone in Europe to fight against the onslaught of the Nazi army.
Beginning in May and June, Hitler and his Nazi army began taking over more countries, and on June 5th, they took over the English ports and channels. Without receiving U.S. aid yet, it seemed that Britain would fall to the same fate as the collapsed country of France. However, Churchill refused to surrender to the Nazi army, and the inspired people of Britain remained strong behind their Prime Minister. After this, Churchill gave his most historical, notable, and inspiring speech. This was their finest hour. The purpose of the speech was to raise the morale of the British Army.
What General Weygand has called the Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be freed, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its commonwealths last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
In May of 1941, Hitler had offered a peace treaty to Prime Minister Winston Churchill, knowing that the British had few European allies standing. Hitler had offered to leave Britain alone as long as the British would not impede on the Nazis' planned attack on the Soviet Union. Churchill boldly declined, taking a stand against Hitler and his European allies.
Churchill continued to fight, especially after the London air blitz. This was a period of intense bombing beginning on September 7, 1940, reaching its climax on December 29, 1940, and ending in May of 1941. On October 29, 1941, he gave the Never Give In, Never 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 speech at his alma mater, the Harrow boarding school. The speech was delivered shortly after the London air blitz to make sure that his people would never give up. Churchill stated in his famous speech, "There was no flinching and no thought of giving in." And by what seemed almost a miracle to those outside these islands, though we never ourselves doubted, We now find ourselves in a position where I can say that we can be sure that we only have to persevere to conquer. After declining the treaty proposed by Hitler, Churchill joined forces with Franklin D. Roosevelt and the U.S. Knowing he could not stand up against Hitler's empire by himself, he signed the Atlantic Charter, which allowed the two countries to aid each other in protection from Hitler and his Japanese allies. The overall goal of the charter was to gain liberation and the renewal of self-government in the countries that had been overtaken by Hitler and the Nazis. After Churchill signed the Atlantic Charter, he further strengthened Britain's power in their fight against Germany's growing power by forming an alliance with the Americans and the Soviet Union called the Grand Alliance, with meetings in Tehran, Iran in 1943 and in 1945 meetings in Yalta and Potsdam. They discussed war and post-war strategies centered around working with the United Nations. These meetings, for all intents and purposes, were the downfall of Hitler. They were centered around Britain since they were one of a few European countries still standing at the time.
After the war, Winston Churchill lost the 1945 election before winning the prime minister position back again in 1951 until 1955. Not only was he instrumental in the defeat of Hitler, he also worked for the benefit of Great Britain. He helped pass acts such as the Mine and Quarries Act, which created great working conditions in mines, and later in 1955, he passed the Housing Repairs and Rent Act, which set standards for living conditions in Great Britain. Throughout his lifetime, all Winston Churchill did was take a stand for what he felt was right, from switching parties so he could better exemplify his governmental ideals to not giving in to Hitler. He always looked out for the greater good of his people. Churchill sadly passed away at the age of 90 on January 24, 1965, from his fatal stroke. Winston Churchill is worldly known as an inspiring speaker, the model example of someone who took a stand in history, who took a stand for Britain.